Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Esther Krakue Show. Today we're joined by the legendary Conservative MP Steve Baker. Steve is a former chairman of the European Research Group and is the Member of Parliament for the constituency of Wickham. He's a passionate Brexiteer, capitalist and Conservative, all things we love here at TPUK. Hi Steve, thank you for joining me.
Hi Esther, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Slightly nervous about the questions, but we'll see how we get on.
You should be. This is the fraud test. This is the fraud political quiz. We'll see if you're truly meant to be an MP for the Conservative Party.
We're going to find out whether this is the turning point in my career.
Okay. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Okay, well, let's rock and roll. Bring it on.
All right, first question. Should foreign visitors have to pay for emergency medical treatment during their stay in the UK? Yes, no, or other stances?
They should definitely get emergency medical treatment, but I think it's completely reasonable that people who haven't contributed to our tax system should pay, yes.
Okay. Should there be more or less privatisation of the NHS?
Oh, hang on, what's that ticking sound by my feet? Oh, it's the biggest political landmine in the UK.
I thought that would.
Oh, sorry, the sound's gone. Can we go to the next question?
Oh, ooh. Is that a maybe? Is that a no?
Yeah. So right now, the NHS is having its finest hour and people are doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
So, it's really not a great time to talk about structural change to the NHS. But I've always been a really big proponent of mutuality. I look back at the history of healthcare and defending normal working class people, and the mutuals used to be really, really, really good at it. So if mutuals are private sector bodies and I want mutuals, then I guess more private sector.
Okay. And should there be more or less privatisation of hospital and healthcare services?
Oh, Esther.
Kind of a similar question.
The practical politics of this is that things are about right where they are.
Okay.
I don't have the luxury of ideological purity, so I think they're about right where they are. If I were to wade into that debate right now, that really is an absolute landmine.
Okay.
But we've got a flourishing private sector in healthcare in the UK, and we need to make sure that both the NHS and the private sector continue to flourish. But that's one where I really can't go stomping into that one because I am a practical politician, so I've got to be really careful on that.
Okay, I'm just going to say I'm satisfied with the current system.
Okay, cool, yeah.
Okay, now we're on to foreign policy issues. Okay. Do you agree with the UK's Brexit decision to withdraw from the European Union?
Yes.
Yep.
Simply put.
Should the UK abolish the Human Rights Act?
Should it abolish the Human Rights Act? Might need to reform the Human Rights Act. I think we need to be really careful that people have got freedoms from, freedoms from oppression of one kind or another and injustice. But too often we confuse rights and powers. The power to achieve, which is a very left-wing conception of rights. So it should be reformed, but I think abolition's probably going too far. We definitely need one really good human rights framework, and at the moment we have three: the UN one, the European Union's framework, and then also the Council of Europe's convention. So we just need one. The Human Rights Act should implement it, but there should probably be some reform.
Okay.
So do I have to give you yes, no?
I just put reformed.
Reformed, okay.
Okay. Should the UK renew its Trident nuclear weapons program? Ooh, how come?
It's absolutely crucial to our posture as a strategic nation, and it is used every day. Every day that it's at sea, it is deterring. So yeah, we should renew the strategic nuclear deterrent. So I don't like that we need to have nuclear weapons, but since we live in the real world, we need to renew Trident.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Do you support the death penalty?
No. You can't trust the state to get it right. And I think it's a mark of civilization that we do not put people to death.
Okay. Should gay couples have the same adoption rights as straight couples?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they should.
Do you support the legalization of same-sex marriage?
Yeah, I had a real struggle with this one because what I want is for people to go their own way and make their own lives and be happy. And I'm indifferent to consenting adult sexuality. I just want people to be happy. So at the time of the vote, I said I wanted to deliver the same-sex marriage or marriage equality a different way by denationalising marriage. And obviously we lost the second reading vote. I then subsequently supported all the legislation. So I just went to a gay marriage recently, and I'm very, very happy for them. And I'm really honoured that they invited me after I'd voted against it in the past. So, I am in favour of same-sex marriage. I just want people to be happy. But what I'm not in favour of is other people being forced to constrain their own freedom of conscience, religion and belief. And that's really where the difficulties come. So if only people could learn to tolerate difference of opinion, where there's no harm done, well, I'd be a lot happier. But yeah, so I'm in favour. Things need to go on. Everyone needs to get used to the idea that same-sex marriage is okay. It's good.
Next question. Should the UK abolish university tuition fees?
No. Everything's got to be paid for. Lecturers have got to eat. Either people invest in themselves, in their education, or the taxpayers got to pay, and burdens on the taxpayer are absolutely huge. Just going to mute my notifications.
All right. Would you support the return of a selective education system and the reintroduction of grammar schools?
We've got grammar schools here in Wickham, and if you want to be the Conservative candidate in Wickham, you support grammar schools.
So yes, by default.
I support grammar schools. I went to a comprehensive school, and the funny thing is, it seems to me sometimes, maybe I'd have to go back and check, but usually it seems to me that on a hustings panel, I'll be the only candidate who went to comprehensive school. All the rest will have gone to grammar school. And then I'm the only candidate defending grammar schools. It seems ironic.
Yeah. That's the paradox of the situation.
But yes, the paradox of the left, of course, because they benefited from our great grammar schools, and then they want to abolish them. So it's crazy. But yeah, I think grammar schools do a fantastic job here in Wickham. We also here in Wickham have an all-ability school. You could call it a kind of comprehensive school. And guess who opposed the formation of that kind of comprehensive in Wickham? It was the hard left. Of course, it was the hard left were opposed to this act of subversion, trying to undermine the grammar school system. So you couldn't make up really the left's inconsistencies.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Should free meals be offered to all primary school students?
All is really tricky because it shouldn't be the state's job to feed everybody. And we definitely should have free school meals for those who need them. But no.
Not to everyone, I think.
We all in life, we all need to get used to the idea that first and foremost we cover our own costs. And ideally, we then have something to give to those in need. But with the idea that everybody can live at everybody else's expense, that idea is toxic. It always fails every time it's tried. So it's a matter of personal and family responsibility that we feed our own children where we can. And if tragically people are not able to look after themselves and their family, then we have to reach out and help one another. Okay. So no, people should not universally get free school meals. It should be for those who need it.
Okay, now we're moving on to electoral issues. Should the minimum voting age be lowered?
No, I think that you have to converge on one age when you become an adult, and I think that age, it's going to be it will vary between different people, but I think that age is as well set at 18 as any other. There'd be some who argued for 21, some who argue for 16, but the trouble with going to 16 is once you're voting at 16, well, what about all the other things you can only do when you're 18? We're going to lower those down as well. So, I actually think that voting is much more dangerous than having a pint, for example. I know in the short run, people get into a lot of trouble after a few too many beers.
Yeah.
But we're really saying that people can't be trusted at 16 to have a beer, but they can be trusted even if they vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah. Exactly.
No. So I voting's a very dangerous thing, and I think that it's right that it's age 16, but age 18. But there are plenty of 16-year-olds around who are definitely, however they might vote, they're well capable of having a well-informed opinion about how to vote, and I wouldn't want to diminish that at all, but I just think we need one age when you become an adult. And people raise things like taxation. Well, I would just raise the age at which you pay tax up to 18 in all the areas where you can. But yeah, if people really wanted that equity.
Next question. Should foreigners currently residing in the UK have the right to vote?
Well, but if they're not British citizens, no. I think it's really, Well, what is the settlement we currently have during the implementation period? I can't remember now. It's one of those things you study at the time and then we've moved on. So I'm very happy that Commonwealth citizens have the right to vote. I wouldn't take away that vote. But the franchise is highly, highly contested at every election when it comes up, if it's controversial. So I think it's absolutely right that EU citizens couldn't vote in the EU referendum and couldn't vote in general.
Right.
Yeah, and couldn't vote in general elections. I think that's fair enough because it was about whether this United Kingdom stayed in the EU or not. When it comes to local government, I think it's much more relaxed, but we've chosen to govern ourselves on the basis of the United Kingdom. And the people who vote in the selection of the government of the United Kingdom should be people who have made a commitment for the long term to live here. And however they've come to be here and live here, they should have committed to being British citizens, British subjects, before they can vote in our general elections. Yeah.
I think that's a fair stance. Okay, so should the UK switch to a proportional representation voting?
No, that's just a way of helping the Liberal Democrats. And we don't want to help the Liberal Democrats.
I mean, it doesn't look like they're really helping themselves.
Well, what the incredible thing about this, and I don't know why they did it, when they went into coalition with the Conservative Party in 2010, they agreed to have a referendum on AV. Why would they do that? AV is a terrible system. I can't understand why they conceded they'd just have a referendum on AV, because it's kind of answered the question for a generation. It wasn't the system that they wanted. But personally, I think first past the post is a great system because it connects people like me to the area I'm in. You know, all around me are my voters. And as I sit here talking to you, I have to remember that they're going to watch this too, potentially. And I've got to remember I have a duty to them. I can't only do what I think. I've got to balance what my party tells me, what I think and what they think. If we had proportional representation, so that I was the member of one of several members of Parliament for the Thames Valley region, you'd have the same sort of system you had with MEPs, where you care first and foremost about party members' views, because the party members choose where you're ranked in the selection list. Well, that's a very different kind of democracy to one where you have to care about the marginal voter amongst members of the public. So I'm afraid it's a slightly anarchy issue, but I think it is in the public interest to make sure that individual representatives are very grounded in their area and not shackled more to their party.
Okay, that's true. That's true democracy, isn't it? It's the direct voice of the people.
Yeah, the main purpose of democracy, I think, is to be able to get rid of governments peacefully at the ballot box. It was something Karl Popper said. Two kinds of government: the kind you can get rid of peacefully at the ballot box, and the other kind.
The other kind.
Yeah, and the former I call democracy, the other tyranny. Something like that, he said. I like Karl Popper, really great liberal philosopher, and he actually lived out the last years of his life in my constituency. I've got one of his books here. Absolutely fantastic book. The Open Society and Its Enemies. It's got to be read.
Must be read. Okay.
Yeah, I love Karl Popper.
Recommendation for the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's maybe a bit thick, but...
Okay, next question. Should the UK increase spending on public transportation?
No. Actually, I think probably very much no. So,
Dream no.
people need buses, and I want us to have a flourishing bus sector. But I'm sorry, things that run to timetables and you have to wait to get on them, that is like socialism. So I'm afraid I think that, kind of trains are socialism, and cars and motorbikes you can get on and go where you want, when you want. That's freedom. And we need trains and we need buses, but I want people to pay for the choices that they make, and that means, we need. I want more convenient private transport, and yes to car sharing. I mean, yes to lots of mutual things. Yeah. If people want to get car sharing apps and share their cars, maybe we should do something to facilitate insurance contracts that make it easier to do ride sharing in your private car. But of course, I've got plenty of commuters here in Wickham going into London, and we need a good train service as buses go to and fro. It's all fantastic stuff. But if you're asking more, well, I'm not going to resign from the Conservative Party if we spend more on buses, which was in the manifesto. That's completely fine. But no, I'm a big fan of people being able to make their own choices, go where they want, when they want, in their own way. And I like private transport. And that includes, by the way, things like self-driving cars. One day, the day is going to come, you're going to pick up your mobile phone.
They terrify me.
Well, yeah, but trust me, I'm an engineer, you know.
They will be fine.
Somebody will one day, instead of picking up your app and your phone and summoning a taxi through like Uber through the app, and it turns up with a driver, at some point you'll be pressing the button and the self-driving car will just turn up and take you where you want to go.
Yeah.
And if we don't stand in the way of innovations like that, they will happen. Now that's a problem for taxi drivers, but in terms of for the public, there's huge efficiencies to be gained if we do end up with self-driving cars safely taking people where they want to go, when they want to go, and not having a expensive car mostly sitting on your drive or in your work car park, you know, or in wherever car park.
That's fair enough. And you don't have to have awkward conversations with taxi drivers if it was a self-driving car.
Love taxi drivers. I absolutely love taxi drivers, and I wish them to flourish. But I'm just saying that innovation is incredible.
Mhm.
And if we let entrepreneurship flourish in the fullest sense, we will see progress rapidly accelerate. I mean, think human society makes progress through trial and error and people choosing. And I think people are going to choose the convenience of picking up an app, pressing a button, and a car turns up and takes you where you want to go. And they'll become driverless because that's the way technology is going. And it's safer. I think it's going to be safer.
Less human error.
Well, yeah. So if you no human error, if you got no driver, and as long as the technology's working, you know, it should be safer.
Should be safer.
Definitely. Okay, next question. Should the National Railway be privatised?
The railways should definitely be privatised, yes.
Okay.
It's incredible. We thought we'd privatise the railways, and then it never really worked. I mean, they need to be privatised properly, and that includes allowing vertical integration so that people own the tracks and the trains.
Okay.
And people complain then about competition, but people can switch to other modes. So we need to privatise the railways and have proper competition.
Okay.
Should the London Underground be considered an essential service which would ban all future worker strikes?
Oh, that's huge.
That's a huge one, I know. But then does that mean all essential industries, you can't have workers striking in all essential industries? Because that would be the same logic.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. Because I've never stood for election in London, I haven't totally thought that through. But I understand that every day the London Underground moves more passengers than the rest of the rail network combined. I remember being told that. Somebody will fact check that now, I expect. But it's absolutely huge, and it is essential. It's our capital city, so yes.
Okay.
Should there be a temporary ban on all immigration into the United Kingdom?
No.
Yeah, there's no need for it at the moment, is there?
Okay.
So I've found always that I love people wherever I am. I love good and nice people.
Yeah.
We just need to have democratic consent for the migration policy that we operate. And I don't think there's any majority for any kind of temporary or longer term ban on immigration. That's not what people want.
Yeah.
And I would never support it anyway.
Should Muslim immigrants be banned from entering the country until the government improves its ability to screen out potential terrorists?
No.
No.
No, we can't have the government having tests of ideological purity on religion or anything else. You just can't do it. It's a very, very sensitive subject. I represent thousands and thousands of British Muslims. There are some of the kindest, gentlest, most charitable and wonderful people I have ever known. And it's really, really unfortunate that a few criminal zealots have done so much reputational damage. I'm incredibly fond of my Muslim constituents and very close to them. In fact, I'm doing an iftar virtually tonight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so I'm a Christian,
Okay.
and I've got a lot in common with them because of having a faith in the one God. So we've got great interfaith relations in Wickham, and I kind of lament that people are even asking that question, because it's an insult to the the overwhelming, vast majority of Muslims who, just like everybody else, want to just get on with their life peacefully.
Yeah.
Should the UK increase or decrease the amount of temporary work visas given to high-skilled immigrant workers?
Increase.
Increase, okay. Now, current event issues. Are you currently experiencing COVID-19 symptoms?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not. No.
Okay.
And do you support the use of nuclear energy?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Should the government require children to be vaccinated for preventable diseases?
That's another huge one, where the ideologically pure answer is of saying no, because people have got an absolute right to their own person. The trouble is with liberty is that the limits on liberty is where you start infringing on other people. And I think if we've learned anything in this pandemic, it's that disease and fear of disease and death on a mass scale dramatically and rapidly curtails our freedoms. So with hard questions like mandatory vaccination, those people who would be opposed to it, all of us, I'm instinctively against it. It's a really, really hard question now, because we can see the hundreds of billions of cost, probably millions of unemployment that this will cost. It's going to be absolutely terrible. So I think where vaccinations are safe and prevent pandemics, there's a good case for it to be mandatory, but I'd have to really think that through at the time.
Okay, so should I put not sure?
Yeah, you should put not sure.
Okay, not sure.
I hate the idea of compelling people to do things.
Yeah. It's very...
But equally...
It's very uncomfortable.
We compel people not to rob and all the other things that are crimes because they're infringements of other people's rights and liberties. And I'm afraid, as we've seen now, going out there and giving people diseases is also an infringement of their liberties, and there could be a case to therefore require vaccination.
Should convicted criminals have the right to vote?
Well, not when they're in prison, no. We went through this one. I feel really quite strongly about this one. Having your liberty denied and being put in prison is part of the justice of being convicted. And while you're in prison, you should not have the vote. When people are released and are going through and then rehabilitated, they should get the vote back. But not while they're in prison. No, that's part of losing your liberty.
Okay.
Should drug traffickers receive the death penalty?
Again, I'm against the death penalty. I mean, drug trafficking is a terrible evil, but I'm against the death penalty, so no.
Okay. Should non-violent prisoners be released from jail in order to reduce overcrowding?
Well, that's a really big... It depends. Depends what sort of non-violent. So if they've been inciting terrorism but not committing it, that's maybe different.
Yeah.
To somebody who smoked a joint in their own home. It depends, because we can't have... People have got to be treated humanely in prison too, so it would depend on all the circumstances.
Okay.
Should the UK assassinate suspected terrorists in foreign countries?
Yeah, no. Justice should apply everywhere. And just assassinating people without a due legal process, that is a really militaristic act. And when you're in power, I mean, I've had to make hard choices. I hate war, despite being ex-forces. I hate war, the idea of war. We've done so much harm. I voted for the Libya conflict. It then ended up feeding guns into Daesh. It was a mistake. And I was persuaded to vote for war in Libya on the basis of responsibility to protect, because we were going to protect Benghazi from a tyrant. And we then went on to provide close air support to one side of a civil war. And the result was chaos. So we should be really, really sceptical about military intervention in other people's countries. What would we think if China or indeed Russia executed somebody in, say, Salisbury? And I'm afraid this is about the principle of reciprocality in rights and justice. We wouldn't tolerate it in the UK. Why should other countries tolerate it if we do it. So the answer's a big in principle no.
Okay.
But equally, if I were the Prime Minister and it's somebody who's got an absolutely certain track record of mass murder, hard choices, I'm afraid.
Hard choices, indeed. Okay, so should the government increase environmental regulations on businesses to reduce carbon emissions?
Well, we're definitely going to. Net zero has gone through Parliament. I'm extremely concerned about the cost of net zero, especially on top of the cost of COVID. And I think that's now an open question, I'm afraid.
Okay.
A lot of people very, very worried about it, but our first priority after this epidemic is going to be economic recovery. And if we pile the costs of net zero on top, that will be incredibly damaging, and especially for young people worried about their future. I watched your video about the world ending and not ending, and I really think that there's too much hysteria. If you ask the hysterical people, the answer is yes. I'm much more sceptical. I think science is skepticism, and I think that people are being far, far too hysterical about climate change. But at the moment, it is a manifesto pledge to work towards net zero, and so I shall have to vote for it.
Okay.
Should disposable products, such as plastic cups, plates, and cutlery that contain less than 50% of biodegradable material be banned? That's a very specific question.
I can hardly tell how you feel about that from the way you ask it. Again, I hate banning things.
Yeah.
But equally, I'm a Democrat, and there's no doubt whatsoever that the public don't want to see turtles with Q-tips up their nose, or turtles eating plastic bags because they thought they were jellyfish. Now, the big problem with the argument is a lot of logic has just gone out the window. The UK is a neat and tidy nation that does not dump its plastics into the sea. And I understand that most plastics can be identified to come from a small number of locations far from the UK. Yeah. So I think we've probably dramatically overreacted to a problem that is not of our making.
So is that a no? I feel like the question is quite specific. That less than 50% of biodegradable material. That's very.
Yeah, I think the answer is if I was choosing, it's no. But this is another one where the practical politics are. I'm not going to be doing any campaigning on this issue. You know, the public have got an enormous appetite for improving the environment, as I have. But we should be doing common sense things to improve the environment. By the way, one of the biggest common sense things we could do is take personal responsibility for not dropping litter.
Yeah.
I happen to be lucky enough to live on the edge of the Chilterns here, and when I go out for runs at the moment, all the people having their once a day state-sponsored or state-permitted exercise seem to be dropping an awful lot extra litter.
Yeah.
And I think that we could do a lot by just taking responsibility and not dropping litter before we ban more things.
Okay. Do you support the use of hydraulic fracking to extract oil and natural gas resources?
Yes.
Okay. And are you in favour of decriminalising drug use?
Again, I can sort of feel the landmines. I did a several days in drug and alcohol rehab with ex-offenders, and I innocently, because I'd never taken drugs and I don't want to, I innocently asked them, so, you know, can you get drugs in prison? And they all just laughed at me because you can get whatever drugs you want in prison, apparently.
Really?
They were telling me, yeah, these ex-offenders, and they're really serious. I mean, there was an hour-long documentary of me with these guys, and I got on really well with them, and my heart went out to them in many, many ways. But they committed some very serious offences. But they just laughed at me for asking the question. They said, you can get whatever drugs you want in prison. If we can't keep drugs out of prison, it's very difficult to see how we're going to keep them off the streets of a free society. So there's a question about them. But serious drugs, Class A drugs, you know, heroin and crack, they do terrible, evil things to people. And no one should ever take them, and so on. But when I once raised this issue at a Conservative function, that maybe if we wanted to reduce levels of offending and reduce the cost of prisons and rehabilitate more drug addicts, we needed to take a more radical approach. I was told afterwards, never speak of it again, Steve.
Oh.
and I've already said too much.
Okay.
So it's a very, I've got a lot of sympathy for addicts. They've lost control of themselves, and often because of really awful family circumstances going back a long way. So our hearts should go out to them, and the policy we should adopt should be the one that minimises harm and promotes abstinence.
Okay.
But I'm just conscious that policies of prohibition used to be so laughable that when the Americans had a policy of prohibiting alcohol, you remember?
Yeah.
And then there was a kids' film parodying all the crime that went with the prohibition of alcohol. So, and here we are today. We've got so much crime goes with the prohibition of drugs. So I think we should all be asking ourselves serious questions about personal responsibility and freedom and justice, and how we minimise harm and promote welfare and prosperity. But no one should be taking drugs. I mean, they're awful.
So I'm just going to put no.
Because
No, but I want to be honest about the arguments. The personal freedom responsibilities for letting people take what they want are all fine up to the point that people very dramatically harm themselves and hundreds of other people around them. So it's got to be a no, I think, probably.
Okay. Do you support the use of 0-hour contracts?
0-hour contracts are a really important part of our workforce. And there are some quite high paid people on 0-hour contracts. So like locum doctors, for example. I put on the record the other day that my wife's a locum doctor. But if the way the world works these days with umbrella companies to sort out PAYE tax, you need to be on a 0-hour contract. And now you could either have people being properly self-employed but working exclusively for one customer, one client at a time, but then the state doesn't like that and introduces rules called IR35.
Yeah.
Or you have to have 0-hour contracts and people are PAYE but for an umbrella company. And the state doesn't like freedom, so the state keeps trying to curtail it. That's how I feel about it. The state keeps opposing it, and the left don't like freedom, so the left keep opposing it. But 0 hours contracts are a very essential part of our society and our workforce. But I'm very, very glad that we banned exclusive 0-hour contracts, because that was unjust and oppressive. Absolutely wrong to say to somebody, you've got to be on a 0-hour contract, but you may not work for anybody else, especially when they're not high paid. That's absolutely wrong.
Yeah, that's
But
horrible.
normal 0-hour contracts are an important part of a vibrant workforce at many levels of income.
Should the UK reinstate a form of mandatory national service?
No. That's a thing that you only do in the face of an existential war.
Should the UK raise taxes on the rich?
No. Taxes on the rich are already very high.
Yeah.
Okay, should the government raise the national minimum wage?
We just did. Minimum wage. I've got economics in one lesson here. Economics in one lesson. Everyone, read this book. There's the camera. Read this book. It's got a great session on minimum wages, but the practical reality of the world we live in today, it's got so many economic distortions in it. Ones that raise the cost of living, things like housing.
Yeah.
Current theory seems to be that provided minimum wages aren't more than, I think it's 60% of median wages, then they don't promote unacceptable unemployment. But if you look at the Budget Red Book, when we put up the minimum wage, it does say in there the estimate of the number of additional people who will be unemployed. I remember reading it. And so that's an injustice. The state says we're putting up the minimum wage, knowing that some people will go out of work as a result, but thinks that for the greater good, that's okay. But again, this is another landmine. We don't live in a laissez-faire society. And with all the other interventions that we have that drive up the cost of living, the minimum wage policy which we have today is the right one in all the circumstances. But is it ideologically pure? Is it probably the right? Would it be the right thing to do if you were starting again? No.
No.
Is it the right thing to do, bearing in mind that the state drives up the cost of living, especially in housing? I'm afraid, yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going to put no because they just recently raised it. Okay, so should the top tax rate of income over £150,000 be raised to 50%?
No.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. At some point, you give half of what you earn to the state. Why would you want to earn more money? Right. Which part? Sorry.
We're already in a position where the top small percent, I can't remember the figures now, but it's something like 1% of income taxpayers paying 28% of all income tax last time I checked. I'd encourage people to go and check the facts. But there's already been reporting that we're too dependent on the highest earners for the income tax take that the state has. And taxing them more, even if it worked, and making us more dependent on the choices made by a tiny fraction of the workforce, it's not a good idea in everyone's interests. And we actually need those people out there doing more, earning more. And actually, if you had a lower rate of tax and they earned more, they'd still pay more nominal. The nominal amount of tax they pay, of course, keeps increasing as they earn more. And it's just jealousy to just keep putting up taxes on the rich.
Yeah.
I want to promote philanthropy because there's virtue in philanthropy, but there's not virtue in jealously imposing higher taxes.
Okay. Which party do you identify with the most? UKIP, Lib Dems, Labour, Green, Conservative.
Definitely the Conservatives.
Okay.
And which qualities are most important to you in a candidate? Accountability, effectiveness, common sense, commitment, consistency, morality, leadership, honesty, vision, communication, determination, transparency, intelligence, integrity.
That's a lot of stuff.
Well, there's a lot of stuff and there's some overlap there. I mean, the reality is, for me, the most important thing is that they are the Conservative candidate.
Okay.
But Conservative candidates, I would say, if you made me pick three: integrity, leadership, and you said intelligence, I would call it effective intelligence, because we don't want academics, we want people with common sense. So integrity, leadership, and effective intelligence, I would make my top three.
Okay.
Awesome. So let's see what it spits out. Hold on. This might take a second.
Don't tell me it's fallen over like the voting system.
Oh, I know.
This week.
It's about to break down. Too much Conservative answers.
You are 85% Conservative
Excellent.
and 52% UKIP. Okay. Well, you're definitely a Conservative if anyone doesn't.
No, UKIP has so gone to the wall now.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I mean, they're done. So.
The Conservative Party's always been a broad coalition. I would say my instincts are all classical liberal.
Okay.
Old English liberal is where all my instincts are. But as I said in the course of the answers, I'm a real practical politician, and we don't have the luxury of ideological purity. But it's been a lot of fun to talk things through.
39% Liberal Democrat, 39% Labour, 38% Brexit Party, and 21% Green.
I'm surprised I'm as much as 21% Green. I love the environment, but the Greens are just so hard left.
Yeah.
The thing is, we all want to live in a good environment. Of course we do. Conservatives conserve things that are good, and that means the environment. But we've got to be sensible about how we do it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here, Steve. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for completing this quiz.
Thank you, Esther. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.